Imagine a world where nature turns against you, where rivers run red and darkness swallows the day. This was the reality for the Egyptians during the 10 plagues. These were not ordinary natural disasters, but rather a series of divine retributions. They were punishments from God to the Egyptians for their refusal to release the Israelites from the shackles of slavery. The book of Exodus, chapter 7, verses 4 to 5, provides us with the context. It reads, "But Pharaoh will not listen to you. Then I will lay my hand on Egypt, and with mighty acts of judgment I will bring out my divisions, my people the Israelites." The 10 plagues were, in essence, a display of God's might and power, an assertion of his supreme control over all earthly elements. These plagues were not random acts of nature, but divine interventions designed to demonstrate God's power. Let's delve into the 10 plagues and the lessons they hold for us. Our journey begins with the first plague, the transformation of the Nile's water into blood. This was not just a physical change, but a symbolic one as well. The Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt, was turned into a river of death. This plague serves as a stark reminder that even the most fundamental elements of our lives can be turned upside down in an instant. The Bible, in Exodus chapter 7, verse 20, narrates this event, emphasizing the omnipotence of God. Next came the plague of frogs. Frogs were everywhere, in homes, in beds, in ovens, and kneading troughs. This second plague, as described in Exodus 8, verses 2 to 4, revealed God's power to disrupt daily life and instill discomfort, even with the most harmless of creatures. The third plague, the plague of gnats, was a direct attack on the Egyptian gods. The Egyptians worshipped the earth god, Geb. However, God turned the very dust of the earth into gnats, showing his sovereignty over all creation, as narrated in Exodus 8, verses 16 to 17. The fourth plague, the swarm of flies, was a demonstration of God's precision. God made a distinction between the Egyptians and the Israelites, as flies swarmed only the Egyptians' land, leaving the Israelites untouched. Exodus 8, verses 22 to 23 bear witness to this. Next, the fifth plague, a severe pestilence on the livestock. Here, God showed his power over wealth and economy. The Egyptians prided themselves on their livestock, but God could take it away in an instant. This is documented in Exodus 9, verses 3 to 6. The sixth plague, boils that broke out in sores. With this plague, God showed his power over health and well-being. Despite all their knowledge, the Egyptian magicians couldn't stand before Moses because of the boils, as Exodus 9 verses 10 to 11 recounts. Then came the seventh plague, the thunderstorm of hail. This was the first plague that gave Pharaoh a choice. He could have saved his people and livestock by bringing them indoors, but his stubbornness led to destruction. We see this in Exodus 9 verses 18 to 25. The eighth plague, the locusts, was a direct attack on the food supply. God demonstrated that he could take away sustenance just as easily as he provides it. This is highlighted in Exodus 10, verses 12 to 15. Following this was the ninth plague, darkness. For 3 days, Egypt was engulfed in a darkness that could be felt. This was an attack on the Egyptian sun god, Ra. God showed that he could control light and darkness, as Exodus 10, verses 21 to 23 describes. Finally, the 10th plague, the death of the firstborn. This was the most severe and personal of all the plagues. God demonstrated that he holds power over life and death. Exodus chapter 11 verses 4 to 6 detail this. Each plague was a divine response to the hardness of Pharaoh's heart, a testament to God's unyielding demand for justice. In each of these plagues, we see a God who is powerful, just, and sovereign. These stories serve as a reminder of God's might, his justice, and his mercy. They hold lessons for us, even today, as we navigate our own personal challenges and trials. The 10 plagues are not just a historical event, but a spiritual lesson for all of us. They teach us fundamental truths about the human condition and our relationship with the divine. One of the most striking lessons from the 10 plagues is the importance of obedience to God. We see this in the story of Moses, who, despite his initial hesitation, obeys God's command to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. This obedience did not come without its challenges, but Moses' faith in God gave him the strength to persevere. As Psalm 119 verse 60 says, "I hasten and do not delay to keep your commandments." The 10 plagues also show us the consequences of pride and stubbornness. Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, repeatedly refused to free the Israelites, despite the suffering his people endured. His pride and stubbornness led to the downfall of his kingdom. Proverbs 16 verse 18 warns us, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." And then there's the power of faith. Despite the hardships they faced, the Israelites remained faithful. They trusted in God's promise of deliverance, even when their situation seemed hopeless. Hebrews 11 verse 1 defines faith as the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. The Israelites exemplified this verse during their time in Egypt. These lessons from the 10 plagues are not just for the Israelites, but for all of us. They remind us to be obedient to God, to avoid pride and stubbornness, and to have faith even in the toughest of times. They show us that our actions have consequences, but that God is always ready to guide and help those who turn to Him. The 10 plagues are more than just an ancient story. They are a spiritual guide, a moral compass, teaching us about the importance of humility, obedience, and faith. Each plague was a lesson, a call to recognize the power of God and the consequences of defiance. The 10 plagues may have occurred thousands of years ago, but their lessons resonate with us today. These biblical events, while steeped in antiquity, still pulsate with contemporary relevance. Let's explore this further. The first lesson is humility. Egypt's pharaoh, a figure of immense power and pride, was brought low by the plagues, reminding us that no one is above divine judgment. As Proverbs chapter 16 verse 18 teaches us, pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. The second lesson is faith. The Israelites, despite their sufferings, held steadfast in their belief, illustrating the strength of unwavering faith in the face of adversity. This is echoed in Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Finally, the plagues underscore the importance of justice. They were not arbitrary acts of cruelty, but divine responses to the enslavement and oppression of God's chosen people. In the book of Micah, chapter 6, verse 8, we find the call to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God. These lessons of humility, faith, and justice are timeless, serving as guiding principles for us in today's complex world. The 10 plagues are a timeless reminder of God's power and justice, a lesson we must never forget. The 10 plagues were a divine demonstration of power and justice. As we journeyed through the story, we uncovered the profound significance of these events, unraveled their lessons, and explored their relevance in our contemporary world. From the first plague of turning water into blood to the final plague of death of the firstborn, they served as reminders of divine justice. Their echoes resonate today, urging us to reflect on our actions and choices. May we always remember the lessons of the 10 plagues and strive to live in obedience to God's will.